This is an ABC News Live special report. The Ukraine-Russia crisis.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks so much for joining us in our special coverage of Russia's assault on Ukraine. Here's the latest at this hour. A bit of daylight for diplomats. Ukrainian President Zelensky agreeing to send a delegation to meet Russian negotiators at the border with Belarus. As intense battles continue in both Kyiv and Kharkiv, Ukrainians still in control as they enter a third day of fighting those Russian soldiers. The brother of Kyiv's mayor, a former heavyweight champ, pleading for action against Russian aggression now.
Just today, civilians were shot by the rockets. With special operations, civilians getting killed. And it's happening in the heart of Europe.
And it's happening as Russian President Vladimir Putin now rattling his nuclear saber, ordering his military to be on alert against aggressive statements, he says, from NATO countries. A senior U.S. defense official calling that move unnecessary and escalatory. The United Nations reporting at least 64 civilians killed, more than 170 others injured in the fighting, and more than 368,000 refugees fleeing into neighboring countries, a number that's only expected to grow. And breaking just a few minutes ago, the European Union announcing it will purchase and deliver weapons to Ukraine, a first for the EU. All European Union countries also banning Russian planes from EU airspace. Let's bring in senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky in western Ukraine, along with senior Washington correspondent Devin Dwyer, who's here with us in our nation's capital. Aaron, let's begin with you. Ukraine saying missiles hit actually a radioactive waste disposal facility in Kyiv overnight. What danger does that now pose to those who are still in the city?
Well, thankfully, there was no apparent damage or any evidence of a radioactive leak. This is the kind of facility that helps with disposal of radioactive material from hospitals and the like. So it's low-level stuff. But it's an example, Kira, of the kind of collateral damage that can happen. And it's not the only bit of civilian infrastructure that's been hit so far in these early days of the fighting, as this fighting goes on multiple fronts, mainly in the capital, Kyiv. That's the centerpiece of the Russian invasion. But there's also been heavy fighting in Kharkiv, out into the east. In both places, though, the Ukrainian military says the defense is holding. And that's thanks in large part not only to the Ukrainian military, which President Zelensky has been trying to constantly rally, but also to a group of citizen soldiers who've been called to the fight. And I wanted to show you, Kira, if I could, the officials here in Ukraine have been posting instructions on how to make Molotov cocktails, and citizens are taking them up on the offer. And the most popular brewer in Lviv, Pravda Brewing, is no longer filling these bottles with beer, but giving them out empty so people can put gasoline and stuff a dish rag at the top to make a Molotov cocktail. This particular bottle has a rather unflattering picture of Vladimir Putin and an equally unflattering caption. But they are taking this very seriously, and citizens are learning to make Molotov cocktails and stockpiling them in ditches along the side of the road should there be any need if the Russian army should advance here.
So, Aaron, what does that tell you about just how Ukrainians are responding and preparing? I mean, we talk about the refugee crisis and so many people leaving. At the same time, clearly, there are Ukrainians wanting to stay and protect their homeland.
We've heard that hubris, that they are not going to go down without a fight. But there's also a sadness behind it, Kira, because they just say they want to live. If you look at Kyiv or any Ukrainian city, this was a modern capital a week ago, where people were outside, sipping coffee or on their laptops doing work, as you'd see anywhere in the United States or around the world. And almost instantaneously, it has been turned onto a war footing. And that involves the troops, but it also involves people that we see on the streets just tracking luggage. And we were at Lviv's main train station today. It's a real place of refuge for people that are fleeing more dangerous parts of the country and trying to head for one of the international borders, as almost 400,000 Ukrainians have already done, according to the United Nations. People are waiting hours and hours on the platform in the main hall. Kids are just propped on luggage, fiddling with a Rubik's Cube, babies in mothers' arms as people try to flee for safer ground.
And at the same time, you know, what to make of Putin's latest comment of Devin on high alert, responding with these threats of using nuclear weapons. How is the White House responding to this?
Yeah, Kira, Russia has the largest stockpile of nuclear warheads in the world, more than 6,000 of them, 1,600 of them actively deployed. So certainly a concerning threat by President Putin. The White House at this hour doesn't seem particularly alarmed. We heard from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. She said this is part of a pattern from Vladimir Putin, manufacturing threats to justify his aggression in Ukraine and elsewhere. She insisted there's at no point been a direct threat from NATO, much less Ukraine, towards Russia or its people. That's a sentiment that's been echoed just a few minutes ago by the Pentagon. Kira, as you said, they have called this move, this announcement by Vladimir Putin, escalatory and unnecessary. There is real concern, though, that this threat by President Putin could, risk a miscalculation in some way by putting these forces on higher alert. So certainly watching that very closely, although I should say, Kira asked directly if the United States has changed its nuclear strategic defense posture. An official would only say that the Pentagon is very confident in our posture at this stage, but no question that this has injected a new sense of worry and concern as this continues to evolve.
And Devin, Secretary of State Antony Blinken also saying the United States will provide $54 million now in humanitarian aid to help Ukrainians. What exactly will that money go toward?
Yeah, the United States is the biggest donor of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Hundreds of millions of dollars already given, $54 million announced overnight. This is to address that humanitarian crisis you talked about earlier. 368,000 so far, according to the UN, fleeing for the borders. Samantha Power, the USAID administrator, tweeted a short time ago a picture of some of that aid arriving. 23,000 high thermal blankets. It's cold over there. Aaron can tell you that. It's damp, it's chilly, people waiting in line for hours outside on both sides of the border. And also this, take a look, 640 satellite phones to help maintain communications on the ground. That has been seen as critical to the Ukrainians. A lot of their officials have asked for this as the Ukrainian military jams communications, launches those cyber attacks on the internet. Having sat phones on the ground could be a critical help to them as they communicate with the West and with their allies, Karen.
All right, Aaron Katersky and Devin Dwyer, gentlemen, thank you so much. And as residents in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, are now being urged to stay indoors as Russian light armored vehicles have actually managed to enter the city. ABC News contributor General Robert Abrams, former commander of U.S. forces in Korea, along with Lieutenant General Doug Lute, former U.S. ambassador to NATO, join me now to discuss the latest tactics and strategies here. And just for a moment, gentlemen, I've seen so many articles circulating as of this morning, political leaders, military leaders speaking out about the mental state of Vladimir Putin. We'll get to what's taking place on the streets in just a moment, but if I could just get both of you to react, and General Lute, I'll start with you. I was looking at Marco Rubio. He was tweeting, I wish I could share more, but for now I can say it's pretty obvious to many that something is off with Putin. He's always been a killer, but his problem now is different and significant. It would be a mistake to assume this Putin would react the same way he would have 5 years ago. And at the same time, Michael McFaul, who is Obama's ambassador to Russia, he's been paying attention as well. He tweeted, I've watched and listened to Putin for more than 30 years. He's changed. He sounds completely disconnected from reality. He sounds unhinged. As military generals, I want to get your reaction. General Lute, first to you.
Well, first of all, I'll pass on this opportunity to express myself as an amateur psychiatrist. All right. What bothers me is his decision-making style and the decision-making arrangement that he's crafted over these years, a very autocratic rule, places him alone in the decision tree, isolates him from dissenting views, and actually suppresses dissenting views, as we saw very publicly in his so-called National Security Council session last week. So it's his isolation and the absence of dissent that really concerns me.
General Abrams, what do you think? Is Putin losing his mind here?
Well, I would align myself with former Ambassador Lute. Difficult to make some sort of medical diagnosis from this far a distance. But look, we have long considered Vladimir Putin as ruthless as he is, right? That he has been a rational actor. What we've seen over the last couple of weeks is really irrational behavior. And that is something that should be very concerning to everyone. When he becomes and develops a pattern of irrational behavior, and there's a clear distinction between what's acceptable norms and being a rational or irrational actor. And so I think that, as Ambassador Lute just said, he has sequestered himself. This has been a long pattern as reported throughout the COVID pandemic. And it's a very autocratic setup that he has, and no one will challenge him. That's the other problem. So it's a poisonous mixture that Putin has created for himself, and hopefully these negotiations will bear some fruit that maybe we can get him to off-ramp.
Well, poisonous mixture. Doug, I have to ask you, how do you expect NATO to react now to Putin's latest nuclear threat here? And if Putin actually orders a nuclear strike, what do you think the response would be?
Well, I think the nuclear deterrent, which is founded not as much on NATO, although NATO has some nuclear capability, but mostly on the strategic nuclear deterrent capability of the United States. This will be watched very carefully. And I think what's probably happening inside the Pentagon today and inside U.S. Strategic Command, which has control of our nuclear forces, is a very careful look at the difference between what Putin says, his rhetoric, as we saw today, right, his declaratory statements, and what actually happens on the ground. So do we see some change of status in nuclear warheads? Are they moved from one position to another? What about the delivery systems? Do we see nuclear-capable submarines put out to sea, out of port and to sea? What about nuclear-capable aircraft? Do their alert statuses actually change? Are there changes in the command and control system that we detect? So these will all be things that we're going to be watching very carefully. I think in the meantime, we should rest assured that our nuclear deterrent is in place, it's ready, and it's under appropriate civilian control.
So, General Abrams, Russian forces appear to be a bit disoriented as Ukrainians battle back. A U.S. official actually said that one Russian soldier was heard on this chilling radio call saying, "We don't know who to shoot. They all look like us." Why are these battles so difficult to tell which side is which at this point? And what do you make of that radio call?
Well, I think the easiest explanation for that radio call and what we're seeing in general from the Russian forces is a result of poor training over many, many years. Despite all their investments in modernization and so forth, there is no substitute for tough, hard, realistic training with feedback mechanisms and so forth. And the Russian military has never adopted that approach. That's principally seen as a Western approach, and a very successful approach, I might add. So we're seeing the results of a lack of training. Secondly, we're seeing the results of a very poorly designed operational plan and a complete lack of synchronization, as it appears, across all of Ukraine. Maybe some pockets of some synchronization, but tactically and operationally, this operation is completely desynchronized for a number of factors. And so, you know, it shouldn't surprise us that young Russian soldiers are completely flabbergasted, and they are unsure what to do. And it is very difficult. The uniforms do look strikingly similar. But as many reports have said, some of these Russians don't even realize that they were sent into Ukraine. So I think it's a combination of many factors that's all adding to sort of gumming up the gears of the Russian military as they try to achieve their objectives.
General Abrams, also Lieutenant General Doug Lute, appreciate you both. Thank you so much. And ABC News Live, continuing coverage of the Ukraine-Russia crisis continues right after this. Stay with us. And welcome back to ABC News Live's continuing coverage of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. I'm Kira Phillips. Glad you're with us on this day. We have a bit of sad news to report at this moment, though. Amnesty International is reporting that 3 people were killed, including a child, and 1 other child was injured after an attack on a preschool in northeastern Ukraine. Amnesty International saying that the attack appears to have been carried out by nearby Russian forces, while Japan has now become the latest nation to cut off select Russian banks from the SWIFT system and sanction Vladimir Putin and other Russian leaders. And as the U.S. and NATO allies continue to push back on Putin, so are former top Russian diplomats. One in particular who's been very outspoken is former Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Andrei Kozyrev, more recently the author of The Firebird, The Elusive Fate of Russian Democracy. Andrei, good to have you with us. You know, I was looking at your tweet. You actually tweeted that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was, and I'll read this quote, rightfully sanctioned, saying that as your deputy back in the 90s, he used to have your back, but that today you would watch your back if he was behind you. What happened and what has changed?
I don't know what happened inside his head, but it's different person, especially politically, it's totally different. You know, I know that there are positive situations when a soul becomes Poe, but perhaps there is room for reverse, you know, when a good person becomes a bad person, and serving this regime, it just makes me feel sick that he's doing that. He was my friend.
So how do you think these sanctions imposed by the U.S. and its allies are affecting Russia, will affect Russia? Are they doing enough, and will they do enough?
Well, I think now they are doing enough. I would rather see some of those not as severe as this, but some sanctions much earlier, you know, like maybe 8 years ago in 2014. And I wrote some articles about that and made it clear my position. So I think there was a little bit of appeasement also from the United States side all the time. Under all the presidents, and especially from the European side. But it seems to come to an end when they face the reality. You know, it's probably understandable. For me, it was clear from the very beginning, and some other people who are more familiar with the situation in Russia, which has been deteriorating all the time. And it's difficult for the Western eyes to see the reality. So finally, I think they do see the reality. And when I listen to President Biden and I see what they're doing, it seems to be quite powerful.
Andrei, let me ask you, there have been a number of political and military leaders here in the U.S. coming out saying that Putin has lost his mind, that he sounds unhinged. What do you think of what people are saying about Putin's mental state right now?
Again, it's like Lavrov. I am not psychoanalyst, but what I could tell you that we grew up, Putin in Leningrad, which is St. Petersburg today, and I grew up in Moscow at the same time, almost, because we are almost the same age. And we have this experience of the street gangs. Not that probably we were in these street gangs, but we certainly met with street gangs. And if they were losing, their leader or somebody from their side would then play a madman, saying that, oh, I will now kill, with knife or something, and I go to jail, but hold me, people. So that's a tactic which we know. So that well might be, and I believe it is, because he's made miscalculation. He thought that the Ukrainians are covered and they will bow to the aggression, which they don't. And he thought that the West was too clumsy or not able to act. And now he says that it's second miscalculation, and that's enough. These two miscalculations are more than enough. So he plays probably a madman. But imagine that he really is a kind of going mad or is a madman. So I think there are a military around him, and the nuclear so-called bottom, it's not as simple as that. There is definitely some chain of command. And that's why he televised his meeting with the defense minister and the chief of staff, and they probably could play a role, and some other military and people around him who know better, but they risk everything, their families, because the nuclear war is the doomsday machine for everyone. It's suicidal. Yes. So somebody will just stop him.
Well, I hear these words. I hear you say madman. I hear miscalculations, a deadly mix. And we will continue to see and watch how this unfolds, and appreciate you coming forward and talking to us as a former Russian Foreign Minister, Andrei Kozyrev. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And ABC News Live, continuing coverage of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. We'll return in just a moment. Stay with us. Powerful images from the streets of Ukraine as we welcome you back to ABC News Live, continuing coverage of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. As we continue to report on all troop movements, we are also following the massive refugee movement. The UN saying more than 368,000 people have already crossed the border, a number that's only going to grow in the coming days. Our Phil Lipoff is following their journey from Poland and joins us with more.
There is so much help here on the Polish side of the border, but there are families that are coming over who have no place to go, okay? And we just found this family of 7. They were standing there. We began to talk to them, and they told us through a translator they have nowhere to go. So we talked to a police officer who was going to get them into this police transport vehicle and take them to one of those reception centers, one of the 123 reception centers that they have here in Poland. Just as they got them into the van, watch your back, a group of other people came over, a group of volunteers, and they said, We live about an hour away and have a home that can accommodate about 18 people. Let us take them. So they went back and forth with the police for a while, and the result is this group of volunteers, not with any aid group, just a group of Polish volunteers. We're going to take this family of 7 right now. Here, come with me. I'm going to take this family of 7 right now. The youngest, just this big. They have everything, but they have with them right here. It says this is it. This is all they have with them. And they're going to take them. These folks right here are going to take them to that house, which is about an hour from here. And we're going to follow them. We're going to go with them, and we're going to watch them get settled. Okay, a lot of people are coming into Ukraine, coming into Poland from Ukraine, and they have people here. We've spoken to people who have brothers, sisters, family members here. Remember, there are 2 million Ukrainians already living in Poland, so they have a place to go. But this family has no place to go. And they were met by Polish people here who just want to help. And that really is the story of today. Yesterday, the border was it was orderly and it was sort of empty. Today, it is filled with Polish people who just want to help.
Phil, we look forward to finding out where this family does eventually land. We will follow their story with Phil Lipoff there in Poland. Thank you so much. I'm Kira Phillips, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.